Good evening to you. For Telesur, I'm Regan Devines in Caracas, Venezuela. These are this evening's headlines. Chile lifts its tsunami warning as a nation now deals with the aftermath of a deadly quake. Monday 28th is the date Venezuela's Maduro will meet Colombia's Santos to try to settle their dispute over the border closure. And another body in connection with the Ayotzinapa disappearances is found. But who does it belong to? An update from Mexico plus other top stories now on From the South. Thank you for being here with us. We begin in Chile, which woke up to the devastation of last night's 8.3 magnitude earthquake that struck off the central coast of the country. 10 people died and more than 1 million people were forced from their homes. Tsunami advisories were issued for parts of South America, Hawaii, California, and French Polynesia, although waves were generally expected to be small. The tsunami alert has been lifted in Chile. The heavy waves as high as 4.5 meters caused flooding in coastal towns, damaged buildings, and knocked out power in the worst hit areas of central Chile.
We never imagined the water could do so much damage. The earthquake did not do that much damage. It was the water. It was the tsunami that destroyed part of our lives. It destroyed our memories, pictures.
And the Chilean government has called for calm. The Interior Minister Jorge Burgos reiterated that there is no more danger and said that the death toll currently stands at 10, although it could rise.
The death toll so far is 10. Probably, as always, there will be news that arrives from people with good intentions to the media to report the death of other people. But we are not going to go by this until we can completely confirm it.
Chilean President Michelle Bachelet visited the worst hit areas on Thursday morning, but has already received criticism for taking 12 hours to visit the region. The earthquake was the biggest in the world this year.
All the affected areas will be declared as disaster areas because the Supreme Decree of Disaster Declaration lets us establish and expedite and delivery to the affected families.
In another story there, Chilean rape survivors will be able to access safe abortion services within 14 weeks of pregnancy. The original bill, introduced by President Michelle Bachelet in January 2015, permitted women access to safe and legal abortion services in cases of life endangerment, sexual violence, and fatal fetal impairments. After deliberations, it was approved. However, the time limit in which a rape survivor can access safe abortion services had been restricted from 18 to 14. The presidents of Venezuela and Colombia will finally meet to discuss the border crisis between the two countries. Colombia's foreign minister confirmed that the two will meet in Ecuador next Monday. Maduro was forced to close a series of border crossings in August due to the high levels of crime being committed by Colombian paramilitaries. Santos praised Venezuela for gestures at the border that paved the way for the meeting.
President Juan Manuel Santos has accepted an invitation for dialogue by President Rafael Correa and President Tabari Vasquez to meet on Monday with President Nicolas Maduro. The idea for this dialogue is to have a conversation between four presidents and to advance dialogue with President Maduro.
The Venezuelan Foreign Minister Delcy Rodriguez has opened an international conference on human rights on the border. At the opening of the meeting of the foreign minister highlighted the guarantees for human rights in this Venezuelan constitution for all those who live there. She also said that her country is the object of a discreditation attempt that is seeking to link Venezuela with a violation of human rights over the partial closure of the Colombian border.
Venían y vienen a nuestra patria. No tenemos ningún temor en pararnos con la mente.
We don't have any fear to stand here proud and say that it has been the Bolivarian Revolution in all the contemporary political history of Venezuela that has guaranteed respectfully and promoted human rights. the configuration of the social missions to attend to the basic necessities of our population in healthcare, living needs, and essential human rights like political participation has been written and guaranteed by our Constitution, one of the most advanced in the world in guaranteeing human rights.
De vivienda, derechos humanos esenciales como la participación política. Bueno.
Rodriguez also denounced the right-wing media campaign for spreading mistruths about the situation at the border with Colombia.
Y entonces hoy nos convoca a nosotros.
Today we come together as a responsible government. We come together to dismantle the lies of the large global media organizations that do not do anything to represent the liberty of expression of the people, but impose on the Bolivarian revolution and impose on our country. It reflects an immense ignorance because from our beginnings, Venezuela has been a country that receives migrants and welcomes people forced to leave their own countries.
En primera instancia refleja una inmensa ignorancia.
Last August, Argentine elections have been annulled in the province of Tucumán after complaints of irregularities by oppositor José Cano of the Bicentennial Agreement Party. Victory Front candidate Juan Manzur had widely triumphed by 12 points on the August 23rd polls. Now the provincial government has 2 days to put in place the necessary processes ordered by the Tucumán Administrative Court. The government of Tucumán announced that it will appeal the ruling, which they consider attacks the democratic system, describing it as a judicial coup. Mexico's Attorney General Arely Gomez announced that the remains of another of the 43 forcibly disappeared Ayotzinapa students have been identified. She said the student's DNA had been compared with that of his mother. The Attorney General admitted, though, that there was only a 72% probability that the fragment of bone found in a bag in a river actually belonged to the relative of the mother. The families of the victims immediately rejected the announcement. 2 weeks ago, a report by international experts said that the incineration of the students, alleged by the Mexican government, never took place. Mexico's ruling party, the Institutional Revolutionary Party, rejected declaring September 26 as the day of condemnation of forced disappearances during a debate in the House of Representatives. The day will mark the one-year anniversary of the occasion when 43 students from the Ayotzinapa Teachers Training College disappeared. The party is proposing that the day is instead called the Day of the Victims of Ayotzinapa. President Peña Nieto has come under intense criticism for his handling of the disappearances, as last week's independent report refuted the government's story of events.
This implies that there exist clues that establishes the corresponding possibility between Giovanni Guerrero de la Cruz and the remains. These clues assist our investigation and the judge in generating judicial criteria.
The support for Bolivian President Evo Morales continues to increase. This comes as social movements and unions came together to call for the re-election of the president. Workers, campesinos and indigenous people marched in the streets of La Paz after the Legislative Assembly approved a bill that would help President Evo Morales seek another term. The bill was launched by social movements and seeks to amend Bolivia's constitution so that both the president and the vice president can run for re-election in the year 2020. A referendum must now ratify the bill. Morales' approval rating in the latest polls tops 60%. For more now, we go to Dimitri O'Donnell in La Paz.
Up to 20,000 from various social movements right across Bolivia. The message coming from the grassroots, from the people here in Bolivia, is that they very much want Evo Morales to stay in power well past 2020. And to do that, they're passing a note, essentially to the Parliament here, to request that the amendment will be made to the Constitution that would allow Evo Morales to put this to a referendum to the people. And this is what the government of Evo Morales is saying, that the request is not coming from him, his party or the ruling party, but very much from all of these various grassroots movements that got Evo Morales elected back in 2005.
The Committee for the Freedom of Speech and Security experts have reported that the Honduran state has created a surveillance structure using the new so-called secrets law, approved last year, which allows authorities to control information and to declare as confidential almost all the government's actions. More on this now with Gerardo Torres.
The secret law in Honduras allows the actions and inner workings of the Honduran state to remain confidential. It also allows authorities gain access to bank information, computer, public services, taxes, and other information from any citizen that is deemed necessary by the security forces. The Committee for the Freedom of Speech has prepared an analysis of the information that will now be under the control of the National Security and Investigation Direction.
The secret law has at its core the control of intelligence and information, so that now in the country everything will be considered a secret. Any public act or document, if it's related to at least 18 state offices, or according to the law, any other institution with a confidential status for 5 years, extendable for 25 years and even to 50 years, and guarantees a total impunity in corruption cases or in cases that are connected to human rights violations.
For Maria Luisa Borjas, former Chief of Internal Affairs in the National Police, this new investigation and secret structure is the beginning of a more profound state security strategy.
In the first place, it's tremendously illegal because in this country they create institutions. They combine others with any real explanation. And in second place, this is citizen control. We are in the front of a security doctrine where the individual guarantees and human rights passes to a second or third priority.
The National Security and Investigation Direction is part of the Defense Council that is coordinated by President Juan Orlando Hernandez. This new law contradicts international conventions of access to public information, and human rights organizations in the country have said that they will present international demands against the government. Gerardo Torres, Telesur, Central America.
In Colombia now, the Council of State has lifted the suspension on the controversial sale of energy generator company Isagen. Senators from 5 different political parties have already taken legal actions aimed at blocking the sale. Here is our correspondent Natalia Margarita reporting from Bogota.
Following a lawsuit that suspended the sale of Colombia's energy giant Isagen, lawyer Ramon Pava was surprised that the Council of State has now cleared the way for the government to sell its majority stake in the company, even though it has yet to prove the sale is not a misuse of public resources.
The Council of State has given a green light, considering only that the legal procedures for the sale have been fulfilled, but not because they were technical and financial arguments that in fact prove that the sale of Isagen is the best option for the national budget and Colombia's interests. That was not taken into account.
Not only is it that Isagen is one of the few state-owned companies left, but also it has been generating increasing revenues for the public budget. However, the Council of State has concluded the President has the discretionary power to decide on the sale.
The company generates large profits for the state. That's why it's called the crown jewel. To privatize it means to give it away to foreign investors that of course are attempting to purchase it because they know very well how profitable it is. We're talking about Colombia's same story all over again, giving the foreign investors the good meat and leaving Colombians with just the bones.
For economic analysts, it is Colombia's neoliberal approach that not only has led to the privatization of healthcare, education and energy, but also continues to bring exclusive profits to foreign investors.
As a result of President Juan Manuel Santos' generosity, who irresponsibly insists on selling Isagen in the midst of one of the worst fiscal crises, the foreign investors will be the ones to profit. The current currency devaluation will spare the foreign investors attempting to buy Isagen some $100,000 million.
For the Isagen advocates, what is also at stake is Colombia's energy sovereignty, which will be left in the hands of private and foreign companies. Therefore, they would be the ones to set the energy prices for the final consumers. Natalia Margarita, Telesur.
And coming up after the break, remember the refugee who was tricked by a Hungarian journalist? Well, he's been offered a job with a football coaching school in Madrid. This and more coming up next.
Caracas, Havana, Mexico, Quito, Washington. Wherever the newsmakers, we'll be there. Watch it on telesurtv.net/English. Telesur, wherever the news, you'll be there. Rod stars G1 and Claudia de la Cruz are Rebel Diaz, hip-hop activists positioned within a history of political resistance through music. And you don't stop. They invite young people to express themselves about their social struggles. And you don't stop. Watch it on telesurtv.net/English. Telesur, wherever the news, you'll be there.
The truth behind the power. We lift the lid on some of the world's most ruthless figures. Open file. Only on telesurtv.net in English. Wherever the news, you'll be there.
Welcome back. Jeremy Corbyn has finally ended uncertainty over Labour's position on Europe, declaring that the party would campaign for the UK to stay in the EU in the upcoming referendum. In a joint statement with the Shadow Foreign Secretary Hilary Benn, Corbyn said Labour would make the case for continued British membership of the EU, whatever the outcome of the renegotiation being sought by Prime Minister David Cameron. While many Hungarians are in full support of their Prime Minister Viktor Orbán in his decision to erect a barbed wire fence designed to stop the flow of outsiders into Hungary, the international community is not. German companies have now refused to supply Hungary with razor wire, saying that they will not contribute to the abuse that refugees have had to face at the Hungary-Serbia border. One spokesperson for a German barbed wire manufacturer said that the wire is used to prevent criminal acts and should not be used on people fleeing the consequences of war and persecution.
It's like 10 minutes from here.
After the last EU meeting on September 17th, to address the refugee crisis ended in indecision, a special summit of the European Council is being called for September 23rd. This was announced via Twitter by EU President Donald Tusk. The Council is yet to decide on the distribution of 120,000 refugees from Italy, Greece and Hungary across member states. Those three are the nations hardest hit by the daily influx of the thousands. Although most of the 28-nation bloc is in support of the plan, others are undesirous of conforming to the quota system. The father of the Syrian refugee who was stripped by a Hungarian camerawoman last week while holding a son has extended gratitude to Spain, where he will be starting a new life. After media coverage of the incident reported that Osama Abdul Mohsen was a soccer coach, he was offered a job by the Senafe football school. Further, he and his family will also be provided with an apartment near the school's training facility in Getafe, close to Madrid.
First, I thank you for all people. Next, all people look my people in Syria. I need help. Everybody in Syria need help. Please, thank you.
With the visit from Pope Francis to the United States only a week away, preparations are well underway in the nation's capital to receive the pontiff. Our correspondent Bianca Perez has the details.
A group of students from the Catholic school Sacred Heart were chosen to be part of the Pope's agenda accompanying him during his visit to the U.S. These children are anxiously awaiting the arrival of His Holiness.
Today we are actually excited because we will be seeing the Pope, and there's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and we will be able to ask him if we can ask him questions, we can shake his hand. And what we're doing is we're like praying for the Pope, praying his prayers, doing what we can to prepare for him.
A Mass in Spanish will take place in the Basilica of the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception on September 23rd, where more than 25,000 attendees are expected, the majority of them Latinos.
Our Holy Father's native language is Spanish, and many of the people in the United States, a good majority of them, are of Latino descent, and they speak Spanish. And so it makes a lot of sense. And in many respects, Spanish has become almost like our second language here in the United States. And so to reach out to all of those who speak Spanish, who are of Latino descent, it's very important.
Carlos Herrera, a citizen of Guatemala, has worked as a gardener in the last few years and is currently working on the preparations of the Basilica for the Mass that will take place.
We are very excited with the Pope's visit. I have never before worked in a preparation for an event like this one. And there is a lot of excitement and happiness to be able to cooperate with His Holiness' visit.
Pope Francis will arrive at Washington, D.C. on September 22nd, and during his stay will meet with President Barack Obama, will address Congress, and will conduct the canonization of Junípero Serra. Bianca Perez, Telesur, Washington, D.C.
After half a year in exile, Yemen's Prime Minister Khaled Bahar has returned to govern. He was accompanied by the country's vice president, along with 7 other members of cabinet. Political analysts say the Prime Minister's return will assist in bringing stability back to Yemen with a focus on national security. The country's president, Abdul Rabu Mansour Hadi, who fled to Saudi Arabia earlier this year in February, relinquishing control to Houthi rebels, one of several factions fighting for control of Yemen. The Israeli occupation forces have rearrested a Palestinian hunger striker, Mohammed Alan, on leaving the hospital. More with Noor Harazim.
The Israeli police forces has once again arrested Mohammed Allan. He is a lawyer and a Palestinian Islamic Jihad operative who had recently ended a 65-day hunger strike. The Palestinian Prisoners Club confirmed that Allan was detained again after the Israeli occupation forces issued a new administrative detention arrest order against him when he was released from an Israeli hospital. Allan staged a hunger strike for 65 straight days. He was protesting against the administrative detention against him in the Israeli jails and vowed to continue his strike until he was released.
Prisoner Mohammed Allan was not released, he was only transferred from the Soroka hospital to the Barzilai medical compound after the Israeli Prisons Association feared he'd die. They suspended his detention and he was moved to the Barzilai hospital for medical treatment, but when he fully recovered, he was rearrested. It was an Israeli trick, not a release. He was not released at all. Under the administrative detention system in Israel, a prisoner is released after he completes his sentence. But then he can be arrested once again, and this is exactly what happened with Mohammed Allan.
1 month ago, Israel's Supreme Court suspended his detention and released him as he received medical treatment at an Israeli hospital after he lapsed in a coma and suffered brain damage. Dozens of Palestinian prisoners in administrative detention in Israeli prisons have resorted to hunger strikes as a mean to have their voices heard. They are also protesting that they were rounded up without a charge and remain in jail without a trial. Noor Harazim, Telesu TV, Gaza.
And now a brief of other stories making headlines across the globe.
Burkina Faso's General Gilbert Dandier has been appointed head of the country's National Democratic Council. During a televised appearance, the NDC was credited for putting an end to the current regime and was in talks to form a new government leading up to the elections. The general was a former chief of staff of previous leader Blaise Compaoré. Protests have continued in Japan against the enactment of legislation that will allow troops to fight abroad for the first time since World War II. While protesters gathered outside the country's parliament, a member of the ruling Liberal Democratic Party said an upper house panel had approved the bills. During the session, opposition lawmakers tried to physically block the vote, saying it was unacceptable and could ensnare Japan in US-led conflicts. The government of Mozambique has admitted to not having inspected the whole country, however they have declared that there is no longer a threat of landmines. This, 20 years after a brutal civil war has ended. Since the demining process started 12 years ago, 214,000 mines have been uprooted. And finally, officials have confirmed thus far the death count of 14 after Baghdad was bombed by an Islamic State. 55 people were also wounded in the attack. This is the latest in a war between US-backed Iraqi forces and ISIS militants.
Fresh off the hard courts of the Grand Slam tournament, the US Open, tennis's top players get ready for the Davis Cup. The Davis Cup is a country team event for both singles and doubles matches that pits nation against nation over a 4-year period. There are points attributed to each team win. Today's draw will decide which teams face up against each other in the semi-final rounds. And finally this evening, the Russian Valentina Tereshkova, the world's first woman to venture out into space, has opened up an exhibition of Soviet aircraft, and it will even feature the actual aircraft she traveled therein back in the year 1963. The exhibition, which is located in the London Science Museum, has been named Cosmonauts: Birth of the Space Age, and is being referred to as the greatest exhibition of Soviet spacecraft and artifacts outside of Russia. There is more on these and other stories on our website, telesurtv.net/English. From our news teams in Quito, Ecuador, and here in Caracas, Venezuela, for Telesur English, I'm Regan Veens. Have a great night. We'll see you tomorrow.